A 22-year-old college dropout sits in the empty upstairs room of a cattle brokerage in Sioux City, Iowa. No showroom, no investors, just a phone, a folding table, and his father's cattle heard grazing outside the window. 15 years later, he'll turn down $7 billion in cash. 10 years after that, the company will sell for $710 million. Somewhere in between those two numbers is the actual story. Not a story about bad computers. A story about a company that beat every rival in its path, and then, slowly, quietly, beat itself. This is Gateway. The cow-spotted box that outsold Dell outran Compaq, and never saw the real threat coming because the real threat was already inside the building. Stick around for the moment they said no to $7 billion. It's the single biggest what-if in tech history, and almost nobody remembers it happened. Ted Waitt grew up fourth generation on that cattle farm. School was never his thing. He dropped out of the University of Iowa, tried another school, dropped out of that one too. What he was good at was noticing things other people missed. A friend got him a sales job at a computer store in Des Moines. 9 months in, something clicked. Computers were either cheap junk or powerful machines priced for corporations, with nothing built for the person in between. His trainer, Mike Hammond, a former diesel mechanic and also a college dropout, shared the same instinct. Give people an honest answer on the phone, sell them the right machine, and skip the store front eating the profit. Here's the detail almost every version of this story skips. Waitt went to the banks first, like anyone would. Every one of them said no to a college dropout with no collateral and a computer store idea nobody in Iowa had heard of. The only person who said yes was his grandmother, Mildred Smith. She put up her own $15,000 certificate of deposit, her actual savings as collateral, just so her grandson could borrow $10,000. If the idea failed, it wasn't Waitt who lost the money. It was her. That's not a footnote. That's the entire company's foundation, resting on one woman's decision to bet on her grandson when the banks wouldn't. With that money, Waitt and Hammond started the TIP network, selling parts for a computer platform the industry already considered dead. Within 4 months, $100,000 in sales. Nobody expected a cattle farm to build a tech empire. Mildred Smith did. In 1987, Texas Instruments ran a trade-in promotion. Turn in your old machine, get an IBM-compatible PC for around $3,500. Hammond looked at the parts list and did the math. They could build the same machine, sometimes a better one, for half that price. They priced theirs at $1,995. Revenue jumped from $1.5 million to $12 million in a single year. They left the brokerage for an old livestock building downtown, $350 a month rent, in a building that had actually housed cattle before them. This is where the story needs its first real rival, and it isn't Compaq or IBM, it's Dell. Both companies were selling direct. Both were cutting out the retail middleman. Both were fighting for the same customer on the same phone line. But they were betting on opposite instincts. Dell was building a corporate, buttoned-up brand aimed at IT departments. Gateway was betting that a farm boy's honesty would sell a boardroom's polish. For a few years, it worked spectacularly. And the symbol of that bet was an accident. An in-house designer needed cheap packaging and printed black, and white Holstein spots because color printing cost more. Waitt didn't design it. He just saw it on a box and said, "That is amazing." Then he built an entire ad campaign around it. His father's actual herd, the Sioux City water tower, and one line of copy. Computers from Iowa. That question mark did the heavy lifting. It made a skeptical industry curious about a company that, by every rule of that industry, should have failed. Within a decade, that same cow would be gone from every ad Gateway ran. But that's later. First, watch how fast this farm country underdog climbs. $70 million in 1989, $275 million in 1990, the year they moved to South Dakota for the tax break. $626 million in 1991, passing Dell as the top direct sales PC company in America. $1 billion in 1992. Two guys in their 20s, running a company out of a former cattle barn, were now outselling firms with decades of industry experience. In 1993, Gateway went public. Waitt kept 85% of it for himself. He was 30 years old, and his stake alone was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Then came the moment that should be the emotional centerpiece of this whole story. In 1997, Compaq put $7 billion in cash on the table for the entire company. That's the same as walking away from a lottery ticket that had already been drawn. Waitt said no. People close to him at the time said there were things that mattered to him more than money. And two of those things were Gateway and the people who worked there. The same people who'd started with him above a cattle brokerage a decade earlier. He wasn't just protecting a company. He was protecting the only version of success he actually wanted. Hold on to that number. $7 billion. Every dollar figure from this point forward should be measured against it. Because in 10 years, it's going to look like the most expensive mistake never made. That same year, two decisions were made quietly, almost administratively, that would define the next decade. First, Gateway opened its country stores. No inventory, just showrooms where customers could touch the hardware before ordering. Within 4 years, there were over 320 of them. Here's why that decision was so dangerous. Every one of those stores carried rent, month after month. Every one carried salaries, training, and turnover. Every one carried electricity, insurance, and maintenance. And none of it brought back the one thing the direct sales model had been built specifically to avoid: the cost of carrying inventory at all. The entire company had been built to dodge exactly these expenses. Now it was voluntarily taking them on, right as the phone and order model was still working perfectly fine. It was a marathon runner strapping on ankle weights halfway through a race they were winning. Second, and just as quietly, someone in a corporate meeting decided the cow was too folksy. For serious buyers, it started disappearing from the ads. The exact thing that made people trust a computer company from Iowa was being erased in the name of looking more corporate. And nobody in that meeting seemed to notice they were erasing the whole reason customers picked up the phone. By 1999, Gateway held 3% of the entire US PC market. Stock traded above $80 a share. Waitt's personal fortune approached $6 billion. That October, AOL, the biggest name on the internet, invested $800 million into Gateway's internet division. It looked like the ultimate validation, the moment every underdog story is supposed to end on. It wasn't the end. It was the top of the hill right before the drop. 2 months later, Waitt stepped down as CEO. Jeff Whiteson took over. Headquarters had already relocated to San Diego. The cow was gone from the advertising, and the dot-com bubble was exactly 1 month from bursting, though nobody inside that boardroom knew it yet. The year 2000 delivered Gateway's highest revenue ever, $6 billion. It was also the last good number the company would ever post. Then the dot-com bubble burst. Home PC demand didn't slow down, it collapsed. Warehouses filled with unsold inventory that had already been paid for. Orders forecasted months in advance simply stopped arriving. A retail network of over 300 stores kept bleeding cash with nobody walking through the door. Gateway's stock fell from $80 to $18.75 in a single year. By the end of 2002, it was $3.14. A company that had once turned down $7 billion in cash was now worth a fraction of that in total market value. And that's when something far worse, Then a bad market showed up. Federal regulators charged CEO Jeff Whiteson, along with the company's CFO and controller, with securities fraud. The allegation to hit Wall Street's third quarter targets in 2000, they booked $47 million from a one-time asset sale and another $21 million from a deal that hadn't even closed, treating both as if they were ordinary, recurring revenue. Think about what that means for a company whose entire brand promise was Midwestern honesty. The same trust that sold a computer to a skeptical customer over the phone was the trust its own leadership chose to gamble with the books instead of simply telling investors the market had turned. It wasn't a rounding error. It was a decision made by people who knew better, under pressure to protect a stock price the crash had already condemned. Waitt came back as CEO in 2001, not to grow the company he'd built, but to try to save it from the people he'd trusted to run it while he was gone. He cut the workforce nearly in half. He closed dozens of stores. He pulled out of international markets entirely. Somewhere in that process, the farm boy who'd once turned down $7 billion because he wanted to protect his people was now the one signing the layoff notices. It slowed the bleeding. It didn't stop it. In 2004, Gateway bought a smaller rival, E-Machines, for roughly $234 million, a bet that a leaner, retail-focused model could still save the brand. 1 month later, in a single day, every remaining country store, all 188 of them, closed at once. Employees who had shown up that morning expecting an ordinary shift left instead carrying cardboard boxes of desk photos and coffee mugs in stores that had once been the company's proudest symbol of how far a cattle farm startup had come. 500 people gone in one day, not laid off gradually, not a slow wind down. Gone the same way the cow had disappeared from the ads years earlier, quietly and all at once. A year later, Waitt handed control to E-Machine's own CEO and walked away. 20 years earlier, he'd borrowed $10,000 from his grandmother above a cattle brokerage. Now he was walking out of a company that no longer looked or acted like the one he'd built. By 2007, Gateway sold itself to Acer, the Taiwanese electronics firm, for $710 million, $1.90 a share. The same company that once turned down $7 billion sold a decade later for 1/10 of that price. So what actually killed Gateway? Not one mistake, 3, stacked on top of each other. 1, they scaled the wrong way, adding hundreds of expensive retail stores at the exact moment the direct sales model that built them was still working fine. 2, the culture shifted the moment they moved to California, chasing prestige and polish instead of protecting the plainspoken value that made them different from Dell, Compaq, and IBM. 3, under pressure, some of their own leadership chose to fake the numbers instead of simply telling investors the truth about a slowing market. Here's the twist. Gateway didn't fully vanish. In 2020, Acer's American division licensed the name to a company based in Shenzhen, and Gateway laptops quietly returned to Walmart shelves, cow spots and all. Ars Technica investigated and found the truth. These were rebadged Ivu laptops, an existing budget brand simply wearing a Gateway logo. Think about that for a second. The cow, the exact symbol a room full of executives once decided was too folksy to keep, is the one piece of Gateway that outlived Gateway. Everything they replaced it with, the California headquarters, the country stores, the polished corporate image, all of it is gone. The one thing they were embarrassed by is the only thing still on a shelf today. Computers from Iowa worked because nobody expected a farm to out-innovate an industry giant. Nobody expected that farm to then out-fail itself either. That's the real irony. The thing nobody expected became the thing everyone eventually forgot, and the thing they were once ashamed of is the only thing anyone remembers. The cow came back. The company behind it never did. Somewhere, a version of this story exists where Ted Waitt takes the $7 billion in 1997 and walks away a legend. Instead, he kept building, past the point where the thing he built still looked like his. That's not really a story about computers. It's about what happens when a company survives the hard part, wins the war it was built to fight, and then quietly loses the one it never saw coming against itself. If a cattle farm in Iowa can beat Dell, Compaq, and IBM and still find a way to lose, the lesson isn't about computers at all. It's about what happens the moment you stop protecting the thing that made you different in the first place. Subscribe if you want more stories